Hello everyone and welcome to Gaping Chasm. I'm Sam, one half of the duo behind this YouTube channel, and I know it's been a while since either of us have uploaded. On my end at least, I have recorded quite a few videos and even started editing a few of them, only for like different reasons to have to throw the videos out completely. So if I keep looking down, it's because I have a bunch of notes down here. So the other day I woke up and I was like, it probably didn't happen exactly like this, but it was on my mind. I was just like, what happened to Animorphs? Like, we're living in this era of nostalgia, and all these things that are old and that we loved once upon a time are back and they're like big again. And I know Animorphs are only from about 20 something years ago, so they're like 90s based, but the 90s are really big right now again. This is like the era of nostalgia. So what happened to Animorphs, this series that I saw every time I went to the library, and a lot of people I knew had at least read one book from, and was just very iconic and defining for when I grew up. Like, where did it go? Why aren't we talking about it anymore? I'm surprised it doesn't have a new movie out or something. At the time that Animorphs was coming out, it was really big. It came out from the mid-90s to the beginning of 2002, I believe, and it was a pretty huge franchise. Like, there were a bunch of books. There were about 54 books in the main series and then some companion books. There were toys, there were TV series, there were games. It wasn't a small thing. It was really well loved and really extensive. A lot of people probably remember Animorphs for the covers, which are horrifying, but I also really loved as a kid. Like, the covers are what drew me in and made me go, I want to read those books. And I think it worked that way for a lot of people, even though, like, looking back, and even at the time I was like, that's so ugly. It was just such basic, not even basic, I'm sure it was very technologically advanced at the time, but the child transforming into the animal, very weird imagery. And then you like flipped it open and there was a picture of them as that animal in a scene from the book. I mean, that was pretty cool. I really was drawn to these covers. And my personal library had as if it's my library, the public library I went to had a huge like stand that like spun, and it had all the books and it had a couple copies of a lot of them. And like, I would always want to read the ones that had the animals on the covers that I liked, but then I was like, oh, but that's like book like 30, I have to read 29 others. But they were really cool. A lot of times I would just check them out to have them and I wouldn't read them, which is still something I kind of do, except I buy the books now. So Animorphs, for those who've never had the pleasure of reading them, and I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who haven't, it's a series of books written by K.A. Applegate, which is actually a pseudonym for two different authors, a husband and wife team, Catherine Applegate, who did the majority of the books and it was her idea, and Michael Grant. Both of these authors still publish and write today, and Catherine Applegate has won prizes for children's literature with her book The One and Only Ivan, which chances are you've seen that on shelves as well if you ever go to the children's aisle. Michael Grant is also probably best well known for his YA series. I think it's technically YA. I tried reading the first book and it felt like it was meant for younger than that, but it's called the Gone series, I think, and it's about children who are in this world without adults. And I wasn't a huge fan, but a lot of people I knew really loved it, so it probably is good. It's just not my cup of tea, but they do still write, and they are the two behind the Animorphs series. Up until the Animorphs books had come out, they were actually really not that well off, and they ghost wrote for a couple other series, and that just wasn't going the way they wanted. So Catherine Applegate was just like, I'm gonna write this book, and she did, and it became huge. Before we get to the details, a quick explanation of Animorphs. Animorphs follows 6 kids plus an alien later in the series, but at the beginning it follows 6 kids, and an alien called an Andalite basically crashes to Earth, and he grants them these powers to transform into animals. They have to get the animal's DNA, and they do that by like interacting or touching them, and then they're able to transform into those animals. They're morphs. for 2 hours at a time. If they stay in the animals for more than 2 hours, they actually become those animals permanently, which is a huge plot point. And really tragic, actually, because it happens to one of the characters. Spoilers, sorry. It happens in like book 1 or 2. So I'm sorry. So he gives them the power to transform because he needs them to fight in a war against this other type of alien called a Yeerk. And Yeerks are little slug-like creatures that crawl into your ear. This terrified me as a kid. They crawl into your ear and they like get into your brain and then they take over. And they were invading Earth. So the kids had to fight the Yeerks, but they didn't know if the Yeerks were like their parents or the police or people at school. Like they didn't know who to trust. And it was so terrifying for me as a reader to be like, anyone could be a Yeerk. It crawls into their ear. I have very vivid memories of reading scenes where it happened to characters and I was just disgusted and horrified. But like, brilliant idea. When I say that it's war, like this is like a book series that chronicles like legitimate war. It's dark, it's scary. It is made even harsher because they are 13 and 14-year-olds when the series starts. Like they're children. But that's also kind of why it's brilliant. According to Wikipedia, within a year and a half of the first book being released, there were close to 10 million copies of this book sold, or this series sold, which is pretty insane. At the time, this was the quickest, like, the quickest that a series became popular for Scholastic at that time. Obviously, Scholastic would go on to publish Harry Potter, and that would be completely different levels of fame, but at the moment, Animorphs was like their series that they were going for. And Scholastic as a corporation is both really great and really bad, and I don't really go into that here, but there's a very machine-like business to Scholastic publishing, which is actually really interesting to me. Like I said, I don't go into that here. Animorphs books were being published about once a month, so there were about 12 books in the core series being published every year, plus one of the Chronicles, which is like one of these companion books that would deal with sort of more higher science fiction elements, and that also were kind of tangential to the main plot. Like it was important to know about these characters because of the war and like the history and the lore of this universe, but didn't necessarily affect the events in the main books. These books were really thin. They're like 150 to 200 pages, but even still, that's 150 to 200 pages that have to be written every month. At this time, this was like an era of children's book publishing though, where that was not that uncommon. Like I said, Scholastic was kind of run like a machine where they would just like print. And it worked. Like kids were reading these books. People were reading these books. It was just a lot going on. At some point, the authors actually did hire a bunch of ghostwriters to help them with the series. That wasn't until about books 20, 25 or something. I never read the entire series. I read about 10 or 11 books in the main core group of 54, but I just didn't have a lot of patience for a long series when I was younger. I wanted, it wasn't instant gratification, but I wanted to be able to read a bunch of books and a bunch of different books, and long series really detracted from the ability to do that because you're locked in. I was also probably reading right around the time where the series was coming to a conclusion, because these books were published from 1996 to 2001, and I was probably reading them closer to 2001 since I was born in 1996. Fun fact, these books are a few months older than me, which is weird to think about. I did, however, read a lot of the companion books, specifically all the Chronicles. There, if I remember correctly, were the Andalite Chronicles, the Almas Chronicles, and the Hork-Bashir Chronicles, or something like that. I can never pronounce it. These 3 books were even weirder than the core series. More spoilers, but in, I believe, the Almas Chronicles, the character ends up, his consciousness goes into like a giant spaceship at one point that's also ends up being like a god. it was weird. I was so into it though. They were so good. They were so good. They were just really weird. And that kind of sums up like all Animorphs books, in my opinion. One of the highlights of the regular Animorphs books was that they really put you in the mindset of the animals, which was one of Applegate's goals when she started writing these books. That was actually the original idea. She wanted to write a series about kids who got to be animals, kind of. And that sounds like furries, but it really works. When you're reading it, it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, this is what a hawk would be thinking right now, or a dog, or a rat. It works really, really well. So like I said, there were a lot of things that were sold in addition to the books for this series. First of all, there were toys released, and these toys are ugly. They're very bulky. They look like they'd be fun to play with because they're like the human character turning into an animal, but it also looks like the humans are kind of fused with mechs just because of how bulky they are. Like, if you remember the Brother Bear toys that McDonald's was selling back when that movie was coming out and the characters would turn into animals, those were really cool toys. These are nothing like those. And these toys were actually sold in conjunction with Transformer toys, which makes sense on a marketing level, but they aren't related to the Transformers series at all, and I think that confused a lot of people. So these toys did not sell well. These days you can still buy them because people are selling their old ones. They're about $40 on eBay, so not bad. There's also a video game called Shattered Realities, developed by Single Track for the original PlayStation. This was like kind of a platformer game. Actually, it is a platformer game. You collect like coins. It's kind of like Mario. You play as 4 of the Animorphs. Of those 4 characters, you are able to morph into different animals. Total, I think there are about 20 morphs or so. There aren't that many, but it is really cool because each character has their own individual morph, plus like a group of that they can all transform into. And each morph has slightly different gameplay ability. They also have a countdown of the morphs, and you can't stay in them for longer than 2 minutes, which I thought was a really smart way to compare the 2-hour rule to. I was looking for some gameplay footage of this game because this is the only one that's talked about in the Wikipedia page for like Animorphs. Or no, it wasn't even there. I like stumbled into the fact that there was a video game and I was looking for gameplay footage for the video game, so I just type in Animorphs video game. And what do I find but another video game? And this one is called Animorphs Know the Secret, and it was a PC game. While Shattered Realms is more of a platformer, Know the Secret is more of like a puzzle building or a puzzle game and problem solving game. You go around collecting pieces of things and you have to, and they'll come in handy later and you kind of have to just solve your way through it. There's a little bit of a fighting tactic in the game. I think it also allows for morphing, and there's actually more morphs in this version. And in my opinion, watching game playthroughs, it actually had better graphics than the PlayStation game. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. But if you thought that was the last Animorphs video game, you're wrong. Because as I was looking for footage of both of these and trying to see what people thought of both of these, I found out that there was a third one. And this one was for Game Boy Color. It was just called Animorphs, and it is a Pokemon ripoff game. I'm not even kidding. It's set up like a Pokemon game. You walk through like the town and then you randomly come across Yerks, and then you have to go into battle mode where you like morph and the morph fights the Yerk, and it's even set up like a Pokemon battle screen. I was like, is this real? Is this a knockoff? Was this fan made? No, it's legitimately real. It was made for Game Boy Color, for fans, by actual companies. Okay, there were 3 Animorphs video games, all of them really poorly received by fans and critics alike, and all of them fading into obscurity really quickly. Also, fun fact, they all came out the same year, 2000, so that was the year of the Animorph video game. apparently. On a less weird level, there was a TV series from 1998 to 99. It ran for 2 seasons on Nickelodeon. Here in the States, it was made in Canada. It was a decent adaptation of the books from what I can tell. It had to do a lot of things off screen because of budgeting limitations, which frustrated a lot of fans. In general, a lot of fans were just not satisfied, even though it, like, plot-wise more or less stuck to the books. The authors said that they would have preferred an animated series, but they didn't really have any say in that. Interestingly enough, Shawn Ashmore was in it. He played Jake, the leader of the Animorphs, and Shawn Ashmore, if you're wondering why that name sounds familiar, is most famous for playing Bobby in the X-Men movies. Oh, I think he's pretty great in that. As for the other actors, none of them have really gone on to do anything. But in 2013, a channel called Kubo, which I've never heard of before, started airing reruns. But these days, there's really no chance to catch them on TV. I don't think you can buy box sets. If you really wanted to watch it, I think there are a couple episodes here on YouTube, but I'm not 100% sure. More recently, the books actually just celebrated their 20th anniversary in 2016. Scholastic marked this occasion by repackaging and trying to resell the books. They only got through the first 8 books because they were not selling well at all. In my opinion, there are 2 major reasons that these books did not sell well. One is that should have packaged these books up into omnibus editions. I mean, they're practically primed for this sort of consumption. There are so many of them, they're really short. You could pack 3 or 4 in one book and be like, this is volume 1 of Animorphs, and give it a new title and make it really swanky and maybe include some bonus features, and that would have been really cool. Other reason I think they failed is because the covers for these are even worse. They're horrifying. I can't even tell what I'm looking at sometimes. They don't look entertaining the way that the kid transforming into an animal did. They just kind of look gross. The authors were also doing a bunch of interviews for the 20th anniversary, which were really fun to read through. My favorite was the AMA that Applegate did. It not only shed a bunch of information about the making of the series, but it also just revealed how well loved these books were by a lot of the fans, which was so great to read. People were getting emotional over how much they loved it and what kind of mark it left on their childhood. And for a lot of these people, these books were akin to Harry Potter for a lot of other people, in that this was their defining childhood series. And that's just amazing. That's so cool to, whenever you hear about something like that. There have been talks about bringing Animorphs to the big screen via Universal, but they've just been talks and it's been several years. It's not off the table yet, but it seems like it's slow going and possibly very unlikely. There have also been talks for a graphic novel adaptation of the series, which in my opinion is the smartest way to go if you're bringing it back. Recently, they've started to do that with the Babysitter's Club, and they're really cute graphic novels that stay really close to the books, but still give it this really fresh feeling and can update it for the, you know, new readers. I think Animorphs is perfect for it. I think you could get a lot of the same effect that the original books had via a graphic novel. Those were announced a couple years ago, but haven't been released yet. According to Michael Grant, though, they are still like currently working on it. The authors just have very little say in the project, but it is still like happening. And online, a lot of people are really excited for Animorphs to make a comeback. I mean, it's been over 20 years at this point. It's been a beloved children's series. It definitely seems like it's primed. What do I think? Should it come back? Is the world ready for Animorphs to return? I mean, why not, right? It would be a fun series to see return, whether it was a movie or TV show or graphic novel. I really don't think that as a movie or a TV show it could be successful. I think it's too weird from everything else that's on TV right now, and I really think that if it weren't animated, it wouldn't really stand a chance, even though special effects are a lot cheaper now and much more reasonable. There's so much that I think would need to be done. I would love to see it return, but I just don't think it's possible. I really think the graphic novels are a brilliant idea, and I think that maybe if those receive a lot of good reception, it could see the big screen treatment. As much as I would love Animorphs to come back, I don't think it will. I think that when it came out, it was really perfect for its time, but that time has passed. But those are just my thoughts on that. It was really fun doing research into this. It was really cool to see how many people still loved this series, especially considering I don't really hear people talk about it much. The fact that the books had 3 video games blows my mind. Like, absolutely blows my mind. If you're interested in reading these books, which I strongly recommend, I would say go check out your local library. There are a lot of them, and it can get kind of expensive buying them all, and your library probably has them because they, like I said, were huge. And that's all for me today. Did you love Animorphs when you were younger? Did you hate it? I'd love to know your thoughts. And are there any other childhood books that have just kind of dropped off the radar that you're interested in maybe unearthing? Let me know. I'd love to do another video like this. Drop a comment down below and do not forget to subscribe. I'll see you later.